On this edition of North Bay Bountiful, we explore issues of land preservation. The beauty and serenity of the San Francisco North Bay region is a result of land preservation efforts. Partnerships between governments, private landowners, parks, and agriculture have saved many of our open spaces, but there is still much to be done.
North Bay Bountiful is made possible in part by Rocky, the free-range chicken, and Rosie, the original organic chicken. The Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, Made Local Magazine, and Sonoma County Go Local. Support also provided by Pepperwood Preserve and through the generous support of the Sonoma County Water Agency. Cultivate, celebrate, connect.
Land. It's a finite resource, and they aren't making any more of it. Our decisions on how to allocate land have the biggest impact on our quality of life and are some of the most important choices we can make as a people. Misty Arias is the Acquisition Program Manager for the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. So far, the district has preserved more than 110,000 acres of land in Sonoma County, funded through a sales tax supported by county residents. In this work, they are not alone. Land trusts, park systems, and farm owners in Marin, Napa, and Sonoma counties are finding ways to preserve land from commercial and residential development.
Land conservation organizations, whether they be nonprofit land trusts or special districts like my organization, work with landowners by entering into contracts to help them protect their land. In many situations, we can provide them, we purchase those permanent protections for them, so it infuses cash into their agricultural operation and gives them the opportunity to manage their land in a way they might not have been able to otherwise. It also decreases the pressures they might have had to develop or sell portions of their land off because they needed to generate revenue. We do our work primarily through the purchase of conservation easements, which is a permanent agreement with a landowner that restricts development and serves to protect important values on the property like natural resources or agriculture or scenic vistas. We like to look at it as green infrastructure. It's instead of building and built infrastructure like cities and urban places, it's the lands that are important to make sure that the system is functioning in the way that it was intended to.
Conserving our open spaces can help us protect our watersheds, wildlife, and even combat the effects of climate change. The Bay Area Open Space Council works with private nonprofits and public entities to preserve land throughout the region. As rancher Paul Banke says in this film, when everything is working together, then it is working well.
We're at an interesting time in my mind as far as conservation goes. We don't know everything, but we do know a lot, and we've come a long way in our understanding of how systems work and how we can live with them rather than battle them.
The challenge is to try and retain some of what was there before everybody came and try and make sure that we don't completely eliminate the populations of critters and stuff that live on the land.
People understanding why open space preservation is important is essential, and it's essential no matter where you live. We're not making any more land, right? So the choices that we make today are going to impact people for generations to come.
There are a lot of challenges to conservation aside from development. Weeds, climate change, altered hydrology. And in order to meet our objectives, we have to constantly learn and we have to actively participate with that landscape.
And I think that's a key thing that both RCDs and land trusts get is the land, just setting it aside doesn't save it. Certainly as we've had human impacts on the land, we have to be involved in stewarding it for the long term.
A lot of people don't know about resource conservation districts. They're sort of a hidden gem. We've been around since the 30s. I would say probably we're the first sort of land managers that were really trying to understand the whole system of land and water, and all the species that inhabit it, and including ourselves. How do we grow food safely? How do we do all the things that we do on landscapes?
The RCDs bring together an incredible amount of expertise, local expertise, that we utilize as much as possible for all of our projects.
In California, especially over the last decades, the pressure for development is substantial, and so land trusts have filled an important need in terms of easing some of that pressure and providing some buffers around cities.
We buy land, and that's a very tangible activity that we can do to protect the environment.
Land trusts bring conservation easements and acquisition possibilities, and the RCD bring incentives, whether that be education, permitting assistance, regulatory relief, or actually cost share to help install beneficial practices.
As we support farmers and ranchers, they're actually ensuring that that land base remains there and available. So it's a critical function and a critical potential partner for RCDs.
Ranching is getting, and all agriculture, there's a lot of challenges that agriculturalists face. And times like this year, we have drought, we have higher fuel costs, we have higher feed costs. It's really not sustainable unless you really work as a village and as a team, and you take advantage of all the resources that are out there.
With both this technical assistance in terms of engineering and biological studies and so forth, they've allowed us to do some things so that we can do a better job managing the land and taking care of the land.
I have yet to meet a landowner who doesn't have complete passion for managing all the things on their land, whether that's the resource that they're making an income from, or just the fact that they want to have poppies every year pop up in a meadow, on their property.
What we try and do is create the most healthy environment we can for grass to grow and cattle to graze on. And that translates into basically making sure that what we do doesn't negatively impact anything on the landscape. When everything's working together, then it's working well.
I think it's key for all the entities that we are working together and seeing the value in the different relationships and strengths that we bring to the table.
We're always going to have ups and downs with funding for conservation in California, and we have to get over that, sort of the highs and the lows, and collapse that and work as a collective.
It's vital that we're all doing this, and ultimately I think where we have teamed together and where we've worked on a project together, we have a bigger impact than either of us would have on our own. Because of that leveraging of resources and relationships that we get when we work together, we get more done than we would. And so we're going to continue to do that without question.
Preservation status for parcels of land is sought for a variety of different reasons, and populations must make some hard decisions when choosing to protect natural areas. Finding a balance between housing availability and wildlife protection, between retail development and preserving family farms.
What's unique about Sonoma County is the diversity of land types. So particularly if you think about agriculture, in Marin County, most of the agriculture is in grazing, so dairy or livestock, sheep, cattle. And so you can approach the way you conserve land in kind of a systematic, consistent way. Very similar in Napa County, that most of the agriculture in Napa County is focused around the viticultural. So in Sonoma County, we have old growth redwood forests. We have mixed grasslands and oak woodland types. We have the Russian River watershed, which is really important for riparian habitat for fish, but also just the natural systems associated with that. When we work on and negotiate and design conservation easements, they're incredibly complex because you're trying to protect all these different natural features.
In Sonoma County, San Pablo Bay region, this northern arm of the San Francisco Bay is experiencing rising sea levels. At the same time, years of agricultural practice have drained the wetland areas, and the land near the shore has been sinking. Up until now, levees have kept the bay waters at bay, but recent restoration work has begun to reclaim the original wetland marshes.
San Francisco Bay was once ringed by 200,000 acres of tidal wetlands. In the last century, 90% of those wetlands have been lost. But a sea change is happening here at Sears Point, where a 1,000-acre tidal marsh restoration project is evolving. Sonoma Land Trust purchased the property in 2004 with the idea of restoring the land on a watershed scale, from the rolling hills of the uplands all the way to the bay.
The bay used to have 196,000 acres of tidal wetlands surrounding it. That was in the late 1800s. Since that time, we've lost a little over 90% of those wetlands. Fortunately, in the last few decades, we've begun restoring those, and that's exactly what's going on here at Sears Point. The Land Trust bought this property in 2004 with the idea of restoring on a watershed scale, restoring the grasslands in these hills leading all the way down across the pastures, farmland, seasonal wetlands, ultimately out to the bay. The plan is to restore 1,000 acres of tidal marsh, and that's what you see before you, inundated now in water, fresh water from recent storms, which will be salt water when we breach the levee in about 10 months.
In the late 1800s, levees were built and the wetlands drained to make way for farms and infrastructure. Marshland was viewed as an impediment to progress instead of a valuable resource.
So one of the things that happens when you seal off land that once was tidal marsh and no longer let the tides in is it begins to aerate. It's exposed to oxygen regularly in farming and compaction from farm equipment, and that land begins to sink. And all the land around us has sunk about 6 to 7 feet.
With the onset of climate change and sea level rise, attitudes have begun to change. Wetlands filter pollutants, sequester carbon, create a buffer against storm surges, and provide critical habitat for countless plants and animals, including endangered species.
There are a few rather unique and innovative features in this project that distinguish it from many of the others, and this project has learned from so many of the others. The first one is the marsh mounds. Marsh mounds are simply that, mounds of dirt, and their purpose, although they're sticking out now, they'll be under the tides when the tides do come in. They're not nesting islands for birds. They are, in fact, wave suppression mounds. The reason for that is we need to bring this land up 7 feet. We need to build 7 feet of soil. You can't do that in water that is wavy with lots of suspended sediment. We want it to fall out. Keep this area as calm as it looks today will be pretty hard, but something approximating that, and we'll have a marsh sooner than later. So another interesting feature here, I'm standing on a levee that was built, maybe 20 years ago. And you can see it's a pretty steep levee, maybe a 3-to-1, maybe a 5-to-1 slope. This doesn't offer a lot of room when the tides come in up against the side of the levee for wildlife to escape. We have built behind me a levee that is far larger and has a much more gradual slope that will eventually be planted with a number of plant species offering refuge during the very high tides. So this is the site where a lot will change in about 10 months. Behind me, you can see a large bare area. This is our old levee. This was a levee that was originally built in the late 1800s. It's going to come down, pieces of it are. The breach will be about 300 feet wide. There will be a second breach about a mile that way. So we'll have two breaches, one straight to the bay and one to a neighboring tidal creek. And all the levee in between that mile of levee will be lowered so that we'll have as much water coming into the site as possible.
After 10 years of planning, in partnership with Ducks Unlimited, this project is now changing the map of the bay. Sears Point is situated on the north shore of San Pablo Bay, at the southernmost reach of Sonoma County. Historically part of a vast expanse of wetlands, the project area focuses on 1,000 acres south of Highway 37. Seen highlighted here. From the spring of 2014, construction of the new levee, channels, and marsh mounds continued up until October 25th, 2015, when the restoration community came together to see the levee breached and the tides returned to Sears Point.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So come visit Sears Point, hike the new 2.5-mile addition to the Bay Trail to see the sea change for yourself.
The Northern California coast is one of the most beautiful and dramatic shorelines in the world. These cold waters, tall redwoods, and spectacular cliffs and beaches are home to an abundance of wildlife. Ensuring that wildlife is protected and that communities can still access these unforgettable vistas is a balancing act that takes planning and careful conservation.
One of the most magnificent natural features we have in Sonoma County is the Pacific Ocean and the coastline and the, kind of California famous Pacific Coast Highway. And those vistas are incredibly important to the people who live here. The district was really fortunate to be able to work with the Trust for Public Land and the Kashaya Band of Pomo to acquire a piece of land on the coast that was originally a part of the Kashaya's original homelands. And the purchase of the property resulted in the land getting transferred back to the tribe. And the tribe has this incredible commitment to wanting to restore the natural features of the land, including the forests and some of the riparian systems that drain down to the ocean. It's the first opportunity that they have had to have access to the coast, and they're naturally a coastal tribe. So it provides a place where they can do their ceremonies the way they would have historically always done without having to ask permission of another landowner. So it was one of the most inspiring things I think we've been able to do in a very long time.
In a unique plan, the Sonoma County supervisors transferred the acreage back to the Kashaya Band of Pomo. A dramatic bluff-top trail will be open for the public to enjoy this beautiful coast and to understand why this land is worthy of protection.
Kashaya Ama, Kashaya land. We're the original keepers of this land, this forest that you're in now, that coast that's down there. Yeah, I mean, you look out, you look behind us, and everybody sees what they see, but the Kashaya person's looking at utilitarian things, the bracken ferns, things for baskets, our grocery stores up there, all the berries that we pick, that we use. Our pharmacy is on that hillside there, and all the different things that we'd use to heal and stay healthy.
And I think the whole conservation community is realizing how the future of land conservation it really rests in connecting people with land. And we have to remember that Native Americans, they're also the people that need to be connected to land too, and that have been connected to the land and have lost that connection because they don't have the land tenure. So when we think about connecting people to land, being relevant and meaningful to human communities, we have to think about all those human communities. This is about 700 acres of coastal redwood forest on the northern Sonoma County coastline. You're seeing in more than 180 degrees the Pacific Ocean out in front of you. And then you turn around and you walk inland and you go up the ridge and it's redwood forest.
We date back 12,500 years here in the Sonoma coastline. But of course, for us, we believe we walked onto the earth just north of here at our village of Dunaka. People from the top of the land, so yeah, Kashaya folks, and we lived up on top of these ridge tops. Seasonal areas down towards the coast, gathering areas. Having a piece of ocean land that's ours, like I said, restoring our uninhibited right to access our coastline for ceremonial and subsistence, and that coastline's our university.
I feel just really thankful to have the opportunity to be working on this project with the Kashaya. It's not just a story of environmental conservation, important environmental conservation, but it's also a social justice story and an opportunity to do right and do well. We have state, local government, a tribe, a nonprofit environmental organization, and private foundations from across the country all coming together to make this project happen. What I hope is that not only will the Trust for Public Land be able to kind of build on what we've established here and do more projects with the Kashaya, but also that other conservation groups can see what's been accomplished here, get inspired themselves, and also carry forward that work.
Those kind of relationships have been not only beneficial, but I think healing for us. And that the initial work that was done kept leading into bigger and better things. And eventually has taken us to this path to where we're at now, with the possibility of actually getting our coast back.
We can make the important decisions about how to preserve our precious land resources when we are better informed about all aspects of the choices that lie before us. Community separators resist commercial development and the sprawl of unchecked residential building. Parks and preserves allow us to share the beauty and wonder of nature with future generations. And the protection of family farms encourages local agriculture that is healthy and sustainable.
One of the biggest impacts that urban development has, especially if urban communities all grow together, is that natural wildlife patterns and the movement of wildlife and their survival is really interrupted. And so protecting these green spaces and creek corridors that are available for wildlife to be able to move between communities in an area that's large enough for their survival is really critical. Another really important factor of these kind of green or undeveloped lands on the urban edge is quite often it's where the healthiest soil for growing food is located. And so if we can maintain those spaces open for food, it also will have a better local food economy, but then those products are available to folks who live in communities. So maybe they'll go to the farm stand to buy their produce instead of going to a grocery store, and help support the agricultural economy as well.
Family farms have faced many challenges over the past 50 years, including fluctuating commodity prices, the farm mortgage crisis of the 1980s, and the pressures of commercial and residential real estate forces to buy up agricultural land. When farm families realize that their land is worth more than their products, many are forced to sell. But land trusts offer a different solution. The Marin Agricultural Land Trust, or MALT, was the first organization in the country created to protect family farms from subdivision and development. 35 years ago, MALT acted just in time to stop large-scale development and in the process saved agricultural land and a way of life in Marin County.
1